Good evening. The biggest newsmaker with the monsoon today was the telecom sector. In an unexpected announcement, the Telecom Dispute Settlement and Appellate Tribunal, TDSAT, delivered a 50-50 split verdict on the challenge put up by the telcos against a government order that restrains mobile operators to provide 3G spectrum in areas outside their circles. This was being done by mutual agreements between telcos enabling seamless 3G services across the country. I welcome you to the big picture tonight with the growing concerns about two things. The apparent mismanagement of not just spectrum allocation, but also the sector as a whole. And two, the suggestion that top policymakers are hedging before taking crucial calls regarding policy implementation. Early in the morning, news of SB Sinha, the TDSAT chairman, giving his nod that allowed telcos to continue with the mutual agreement broke along with the other member of the Appellate Tribunal, PK Rastogi, showing his dissent for the same. Fledgling 3G services do not contribute much to operators' revenue, the bulk of which comes from traditional voice services. The government ban on roaming pacts has added to the negative sentiment surrounding the sector. India raised more than $12 billion from the 3G airwaves auction, but no single company managed to win airwaves in all of the country's zones as bid prices were much higher than expected. The telecom sector is considered to be the sunshine sector of India's economy, but has been plagued by scandal, policy indecision and alleged mismanagement by the department and the regulator in charge. We will attempt tonight to deconstruct these issues with my guests, BK Syngal, former CMD of VSNL, and also joining me in the studio will be Ravi, Sharda, Prasad, independent telecom consultant, also Mr. Prabhakar, former member of TRAI, and also joining us on the program on the phone line will be Dr. Subramaniam Swamy of the Janata Party and a key figure in the 2G spectrum case and the man behind startling revelations in this case which led to the arrest of several accused as well. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. I'd like to start my show with Mr. Syngal, however. Now, Mr. Syngal, the chairman, Justice Sinha, was of the view today in the morning that the DOT had not followed the proper procedure and operators were not given proper time to put their views. According to him, it was a violation of natural justice. On the other hand, Mr. Rastogi dismissed the appeal of telecom operators, saying that they cannot provide 3G services merely if they hold a 2G license. Which side of the 50-50 split does your logic put you on?
Lost your voice.
Well, I'll repeat my question, Mr. Syngal. Two differing views, one from the chairman of TDSAT and the other member who says he's declaring it illegal, the mutual pacts. Which side of the 50-50 divide would you agree with?
Well, I will go with Justice Sinha for the simple reason that 3G spectrum was won against the existing 2G license. So it's in many ways an extension of the existing 2G license. TRAI also had recommended quite a while ago intra-circle roaming, wherein operators, where they don't have a coverage, in order to have a faster rollout, they were allowed to roam in their home circles as well. Stretching the argument from there, if you could do it under the 2G scenario, you can do it under the 3G scenario. As a matter of fact, anybody who's slightly smarter can buy a SIM card where a customer in Delhi wants to use the services, 3G services in another township and then roam in Delhi. As a matter of fact, I would say that the decision of the DOT saying that 3G roaming is not as per the license conditions is misplaced. It's completely misplaced. It is inadequate utilization of the infrastructure. It is anti-consumer, and as a matter of fact, it is no violation of the license.
Right. Mr. Syngal, let me quickly go across to Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, who's very kindly joined us. Sir, my question to you would be, first of all, what is your reaction to the judgment, the 50-50 split that came in today with the chairman of TDSAT saying that the company didn't get enough time and it was all the DOT's fault, while the other member, Mr. Rastogi, said it's downright illegal. What are your opinions on this?
Well, I'm surprised that, there should be a 50-50 split on this. I agree with Dr. Syngal, who has put it very clearly. In fact, I think this whole problem of the telecom sector has been all these kinds of interlocking arrangements that they have. For example, the CDMA and then the open the UASL license, their conversion, that was one big scandal. Now this present one is another scandal. I think Mr. Syngal has put it very, very succinctly, and I agree with him.
Right. One more quick question, sir. Let me throw towards you. Is there, do you think, in your opinion, a divergence of views at the top? And I'm talking top policymakers, the top level. There have been some media reports saying that the telecom minister is not really, his views are not really in consonance with some members at the top, including the PMO. Would you say, even Sharad Pawar has hung up on sort of the EGOM as well. Do you think that politicians and bureaucrats are sort of hedging before taking crucial calls for the sunshine sector, so-called sunshine sector of the Indian economy?
Well, I always thought that Kapil Sibal was the wrong minister for the telecom in the ministry because he has, from day one, said all kinds of things which he can't sustain, including that the loss in the 2G low pricing of 2001 prices was zero, and it flew in the face of everything that we knew. So I think there is a lack of leadership, and I think in the case of Mr. Sibal, he is overloaded. He is ill-equipped to deal with such a technical department as the DOT, and he has to deal with the human resources also.
Right, sir.
And certainly, the politicians are not giving any lead because everybody is playing safe.
I'd request you, Dr. Swamy, to stay with us for just a couple of more minutes. So, RN Prabhakar is in the studio. We'll come back to you. Mr. Prabhakar, the Department of Telecom has issued a fresh notice to telcos. This is going to hit the telcos hard, given that intra-circle 3G roaming has been declared, well, illegal. How is it going to affect the companies in the near term?
And before that one, I'll just like to explain the difference between inter-circle roaming and intra-circle
Intra-circle roaming, yes.
Inter-circle roaming is that wherever you don't have a license and your customer of one service area goes to another service area, so is able to get the service, you get hooked onto the other operator. The orders for intra-circle roaming was issued when 2008 licenses were issued, and at that time, it would take time to build up the network. So those who have got license there, they can keep on setting the network, meet their rollout obligation. Till they meet the rollout obligation, their customer acquired by them can hook on to the other network wherever their towers are not installed.
They have mutual agreement pacts.
Now, but here now let us see in 3G. UASL license has specifically mentioned about 800, 900, 1800 megahertz frequencies, utilization of those one. So within that one, if one operator goes for inter-circle roaming with the other one, because he has got a license there, he can acquire customer against his license and then go ahead with inter-circle roaming. Their license has been modified with permission to use 2100 megahertz network frequency for providing 3G services.
But coming back to the question, sir, do you think in the short term, in the near term, this is not going to help telcos, a sector which is already under a cloud of a scandal, as well as some people say that apparent mismanagement by the regulator and the department in charge? How is it going to affect companies, big companies, the big three, Vodafone, Bharti and Idea? Is it going to hit them hard?
See, it is definitely going to hit them because they have said they are going to provide seamless all India service. And in this, if it is Mr. Sogi's aspect is taken into consideration, they cannot go in for that one. That means where they do not have a 3G license, they will not be able to provide the service. It will hit to that extent that they will not be able to acquire fresh customers. So important point is they will not be able to acquire fresh customers, but they will be able to give the service to the customers of their other service areas to this one.
Right.
So to that extent, I personally feel it will not affect them much. And important is that one who has got 5 megahertz, he will be able to utilize it, able to acquire the customers, and when loading starts, he will be able to give them a good service.
Fair point. So let me get Ravi into the conversation now. Ravi, as we stand currently, legally speaking, telecom operators, especially ones like Bharti, Vodafone and Idea Cellular, will continue to provide 3G services under the Mutual Agreements Pact, even if it is deemed illegal, because they have to receive further directions from the DOT. They haven't got that yet, but it will have longer term repercussions, won't it?
Certainly. See, the whole bedrock of cellular telephony all over the world is roaming, national roaming, international roaming. And regulators all over the world have held that that there cannot be undue restrictions on roaming. You cannot impose artificial or unreasonable barriers on roaming. And this is a kind of international common law that has come in from various regulators and courts all over the world. So certainly, I think this what Mr. Rastogi's arguments are certainly anti-consumer, and it also flies in the face of what is the generally accepted practice all over the world. Now, really, you can kind of work out a revenue share in roaming is really what regulators look into, but you really cannot put in arbitrary barriers or restrictions on roaming, because that goes against the whole, against the whole basis on what cellular telephony is about.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Syngal, coming to you quickly, before I go to Dr. Subramaniam and Swamy, do you agree with Dr. Swamy when he said there is a divergence of views at the top? We mentioned, of course, some reports in the media which suggest that there is a policy disconnect between the PMO and the minister in charge. Do you think that is also why policy indecision has become such an issue? Because there is a disconnect at the top?
See, DOT is supposed to be providing connectivity. And what we see is a complete, what I would say, disconnects. So it's a joke, rather than connecting, you are disconnecting people. As a matter of fact, Mr. Sibal himself has said that I want to remove this roaming business. He is contradicting himself. On one side, he wants to remove the roaming business. He wants to remove the roaming charges. On the other side, he's saying, please don't have 3G roaming. It's completely anti-consumer. I fail to understand. There are disconnects and disconnects and disconnects.
Right.
Where is the connectivity? It's completely anti-consumer. It's under the same license when the intra-circle roaming has been allowed. Why, when it's an extension under the same license, it's a 3G spectrum, why roaming should not be allowed?
Right.
It should be allowed.
Right.
I think somebody's got it wrong. I think somebody doesn't understand what telecom is all about.
Right. We'll take your points. We'll go quickly across to Dr. Subramaniam and Swamy, who's still with us. Not to be too speculative, Dr. Swamy, but how high is the chance that the government does accelerate another round of 3G auctions post this split verdict? It could potentially be a quick windfall for the government. So the government really turns out to be the big winner post this verdict. Would you say that's correct?
Well, the government is definitely looking for resources. They are in a very tight situation budget-wise, and these are the kinds of things that are being speculated within the government. And I wouldn't be surprised if what you just suggested is what they're going to do.
So you think there is a high chance of that acceleration in another round of 3G auctions could happen?
That's right.
Absolutely.
Let me add that 3G will be meaningless without roaming. It will be a ridiculous thing if you try to prevent that happening.
Right, right, Mr. Swamy. Stay with us. Let me come across, go across again to Mr. Prabhakar now. There is the option of, legally speaking, to these companies, these telcos, to appeal to a higher court following this verdict. They can appeal to the Supreme Court as well. They most certainly will too, if I'm gauging the situation correctly. What are the chances, Mr. Prabhakar, that they will get a favourable decision in their favour if they decide to appeal to the higher court?
No, but we have to look into one important aspect of Justice Sinha, who said they have not been given full opportunities. So I personally feel perhaps Supreme Court may say that they first wait for DOT's orders to you, ask for an explanation, and what DOT gives a decision. After that, if you come back to me or go to TD's head, that will be a better option than at this stage going to Supreme Court, because again they will say natural justice has got to be done.
Right.
So perhaps it will be better to wait for DOT asking for the explanation and then giving a decision based on their explanation.
Right. So you're saying before they start appealing to higher courts, they should wait for the new directive that has to come from DOT and then perhaps act.
Yes.
Right. We'll take a small break at this moment, gentlemen. We'll come back and discuss the larger issue of policy inaction. We'll also discuss some of the steps that were taken during this current regime about minimum reserve price as well, and that has obviously blown up in the media as well. We'll talk about all of that and more after a short break. Keep watching The Big Picture. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Picture, and we're still discussing the current TDSAT judgment, the verdict that came in. It was a 50-50 split with the chairman giving the edge to telcos, of course, but the member, Mr. P.K. Rastogi, not agreeing with him, showing his dissent and saying, deeming that mutual pact agreement that they use to provide seamless roaming in 3G services, he deemed it as illegal. Ravi, let me ask you this. The market reacted immediately after the news broke in the morning. Early trade, the big three, obviously, the shares went up again, jumped in the morning, but the gains sort of vanished by mid-trade. By 2:30, the effect took over on the stocks. How do you see the market shares and stocks of these companies, the big three as well as other companies like smaller companies like Tata Tele? Do you see the market reacting favorably? Because the verdict is split. It's 50-50. So it's good news and bad news. How do you read the situation? No,
I think the stocks will be under pressure because essentially people will adopt a wait and watch attitude, and I think because uncertainty is always bad for the stock market, and this sector is facing so much of uncertainty, especially after Pawar's resignation, right, and Pranab Mukherjee's not holding the meeting on June 21st. And we don't know when the next meeting will be. It's supposed to take place in the next couple of days, who the new chairman will be. That has to be decided, and in view of all the uncertainties of the reserve price, the 3G auctions, the pricing on the so-called excess spectrum, whether it's to be whether they have to pay for, the incumbents have to pay for the spectrum that they already hold, and that has to be decided before the 3G auctions are conducted. So with so much of uncertainty, I see a lot of downward pressure on the stocks of these companies.
And the stocks haven't been really performing in the past as well. So this was a good opportunity. It gained in early trade, but back to square one, I suppose.
I think it gained when when the first Justice Sinha's
his statement came out.
But then when they saw it as a split verdict. Now I think what Mr. Prabhakar was saying earlier is very correct, that the Supreme Court will, if they go and appeal to the Supreme Court will probably throw it back to TDSAT and say, respond to the DOT's new notice, right, and then we'll probably ask TDSAT to take a fresh look at it.
Right. Mr. Syngal.
And then you'll also have to wait till the third member is appointed.
Right, right. Mr. Syngal, Mr. Prabhakar just mentioned just a while ago that instead of directly going to a higher authority, the Supreme Court, perhaps the telcos should wait till the new guideline, the new directive from the DOT comes. Would you think that's the correct course for the telecom companies to take?
But what is the new directive? Because it's a split verdict. The new directive could be that no roaming is allowed. So the anti-consumer approach of DOT will continue. And I would say that I think somebody should remind DOT, when they are saying that we want to eliminate roaming in 2G scenario, why are they saying you can't roam in the 3G scenario? It's one policy for 2G and another policy for 3G and under the same license. So therefore somebody should look at it in a more proactive and a more rational manner. They should allow roaming without pausing. And if there is any problem with anybody on this roaming, let them go and appeal as to why it is being allowed. As a matter of fact, it is not a 3G creation, DOT creation. Some competitors have been writing letters that this is illegal, right, and it has emanated from there. So it's these industries intestine wars are the ones which are pulling the industry down.
Right. Let me throw another question at you. Considering what you've just said on the program, so let me put you on the spot and say, is there a lack of direction in policy making with regards to the telecom sector in India? The spectrum issue has dragged on far too long. The telcos have a grouse. There is a potential risk of operating costs going higher and for telcos that could be passed on to the consumer as well. The DOT is being opposed by the TRAI on several issues and vice versa. Do you see regulatory hurdles and indecisive policies at the top hurting the sector as we go forward?
It is certainly hurting the sector as we go forward. I think very soon it may not be sunshine sector, it may be sunset sector because there are so many policy hurdles, so many regulatory uncertainties. The investor is getting fed up with all this and delays and delays and delays. First you have EGOM because Mr. Pranab Mukherjee got nominated to be the president. Then Mr. Sharad Pawar, for reasons best known to everybody, decides to step down from chairing the EGOM. So we are creating uncertainty every day where there should not be none. What's the big deal? You have a reserve price, you have the spectrum, go in for the auction. The policy can get decided. I don't think that we need rocket scientists or atomic energy scientists to decide these issues. These are very, very simple issues.
Right, sir. You don't need to be an
You are going in
astrophysicist.
for a market determined price. Pick a reserve price and then go for the auction and say, this is the spectrum which is available, and let everybody apply.
Right.
Let the market then decide.
Right, Mr. Syngal. Let me go to Mr. Prabhakar very quickly, sir. You heard what Mr. Syngal had to say. Reserve price, everyone agreed, especially in industry, they were too high. The companies couldn't cope with it. First of all, now there is some plan, there are some reports in the media that Mr. Sibal, the telecom minister, might try to push it down a little bit, just a notch. So it's not a no-show by companies. First of all, do you see that happening at all? Do you see him having enough clout, with top policymakers, including the PMO, to push the reserve price lower?
See, it is very difficult to say straight away because the way things are going on, everyone should play safe. But one good thing has come up that Finance Ministry has written to DOT raising certain basic questions of charging prospectively, base price, etc., etc. So from that point of view, if somebody has guts, he should look the sector objectively. How it can flourish to give so much of economic development this sector brings to the country. Can they take a reserve price which is logical? Because if you give the highest price, 2010 price with inflation, you give that, that's the final price. Where is the question of base price then? Do you expect going more than that one? So it has got to be something different from this price which has been suggested. Let us see.
So there's one more point I want to quiz you on. Now, the wireless planning and coordination wing. You should know this better. You've been part of the of the ministry as well. The wireless planning and coordination wing is responsible for spectrum management. It has also deemed the so-called roaming mutual agreement as illegal. That's one. Number two, TRAI in its report on the issue has said such an arrangement was not only causing loss to the national exchequer but also affecting the quality of 3G services offered to consumers. In light of all these statements by TRAI and by the wireless planning and coordination wing, it doesn't seem like these mutual agreements will stay because everyone's against it.
Now here I have got a fundamental question to you also, that there's a split verdict. So what DOT can do? Can they say, I agree with Rastogi and go ahead with cancellation? Perhaps it will be difficult.
Right, right.
And if they go for Justice Sinha's, perhaps that may be acceptable to most of the people.
Right.
So therefore, first of all, DOT has to take a call. If DOT takes a call, all right, let me take a soft path of what Mr. Justice Sinha has said, instead of creating a problem for the sector as a whole and then going for a higher court, let me call for the explanation. That will give a better line of action to the sector.
Right.
As far as share prices going down are concerned, as far as I am concerned, it was a knee-jerk reaction. People suddenly thought, oh, P.K. Rastogi has said this one, and therefore doing that. Because with this verdict, for any government to take a decision will not be easy.
Easy, right, right. Obviously, split verdict doesn't make life easier for anyone. Ravi, let me ask you this. You just heard what Mr. Prabhakar had to say. Of course, we talked about markets as well. And where do you see this going? Do you think that because it's a split verdict and it could be taken either way, as negative and positive, where do you think that's going to go? Do you think that perhaps it is time for the government and policymakers at the top to come up with one single telecom policy and stick to it?
Certainly, there's so much of policy uncertainty, regulatory uncertainty. There are all the differences between DOT and TRAI, differences within DOT, differences between DOT and the other ministries. Now, on this special split verdict, I feel that if they go to the Supreme Court, they'll be able, the operators will be able to pull out a lot of international judgments in their favor, which say it goes against the basic principle of natural justice to put in arbitrary barriers to roaming. Regulators all over the world, I mean Oftel, US and all, have said that you really can't deny roaming to anyone who asks for it. You cannot, at the most you can kind of haggle on the revenue share of roaming, and even there, if it is if one operator wants too much of a revenue share from the other operator, the regulator will step in and deem what is fair and necessary. So basically, the whole idea of preventing roaming goes against the whole kind of raison d'etre of the cellular telephony.
Right, right.
So I feel that this whole DOT directive are saying that 3G roaming is illegal
Right.
is basically something is deeply flawed.
Right, right. Would you call it regressive, first of all? And do you also think, the same question I put to Dr. Swamy as well, is there some sort of a hedging before it comes to crucial calls by top bureaucrats and policymakers? Do you think that's happening, especially in the case of the telecom sector?
Yeah, certainly. All the bureaucrats in DOT and in the other ministries are playing safe right now. No one wants to stick his neck out.
Right.
And I think it was a deeply flawed policy on the part of DOT to put barriers in 3G roaming. See, first of all, in the 3G auctions, no one got a nationwide license. And if and it's very anti-consumer, because the consumer should have the ability to roam anywhere he likes in the country.
Right.
And when when 2G roaming is freely allowed, and in fact the government has been saying that they want to do away with roaming charges in 2G, then it seems very odd that you prevent it in 3G.
Right. Mr. Syngal, last word on the show goes to you, sir. What is the future of Indian telecom, given the fact that there is no consensus on policy, major policy decisions in the among the major players, TRAI, DOT, as well as the special subcommittees like TERM as well, and of course the TD-SAT. Where do you see telecom going? It was one of the sunshine sector of the economy. You've of course labeled it the sunset sector that could be in the future. Where is telecom in India going? What is needed right now to save it from potential ruin?
Well, as a matter of fact, the policy paralysis started in 2007 by the flawed recommendation of no action and unlimited competition. But having said that, we are a growing, burgeoning economy. There is lot of utilization for telecom. I call it the fourth mode of transportation after land, sea and air. So therefore, wherever there is an infrastructure lack, telecom is the gap filler for that infrastructure. It will make up the connectivity from other sources of transportation,
Right.
by transporting data, health,
Right.
agriculture,
So very
education,
quickly, sir, Mr. Syngal,
and
very
everything.
quickly, sir, one more question before we close the show. Where do you see 3G auctions? Do you see them, the government accelerating another round of 3G auctions? Do you think that's going to happen? And do you think the DOT proposals which bar mutual agreements from roaming 3G is going to happen? Very quickly, sir.
I think the 3G roaming should be allowed. That will give a very positive signal to the markets, and then immediately go ahead with the auction of 3G, 2G, 4G, whatever is to be done.
Right.
And let it be equitably applied to everybody who wants the spectrum.
Right. Mr. Syngal, thank you so much for joining us on The Big Picture. I must thank Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, who also came on the show, Prabhakar, as well as Ravi. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Of course, there seems to be some lack of consensus at the top between policymakers themselves. Of course, it is the sunshine sector of the economy, and we need to save it from becoming the sunset sector of the economy. Some policy action needed, of course. We'll have to wait till DOT comes up with new directions towards telcos to actually take this issue forward. Till that time, I'll take your leave. Athar Khan saying goodbye, good night, and thank you for watching.